We asked our listeners who do they think are the top 5 Premier League right-backs of all time in history. So we're going to talk about that today. We are going to discuss and debate your guys' top 5 list. We've amalgamated every single person's answer, including my list and Gasky's list, and we are going to discuss each one in turn and then just have a chat about the players. Do they deserve to be in this ranking? How were they regarded as a player? And that sort of thing. So before we even start, this is not my list. This is not Gasky's list. So I don't want anyone to be shouting at us, having a go saying you're biased, etc. This is your guys' list. So you can only blame yourself.
We used an algorithm to do this. This is all maths.
Yes.
Based on viewers' positions that they've done.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Don't come at us.
Mm-hmm. Don't come at me. Don't come at Gasky. Yes, this we asked our Patreon supporters who do they think the top 5 Premier League right backs of all time. Before we even start on the actual top 5 list, Gasky, let's just mention some of the players who didn't quite make the list, but still probably deserve a little bit of a shout out. From the older generation, we've got Lee Dixon and Lauren, both of Arsenal's fame. Gasky, in fact, you had Lee Dixon in your
I did. That was mine. Yes, these are the Arsenal Invincible era. Late 90s. Great right backs. Not as well known as some more modern ones. Not played as many games potentially, but they were brilliant fullbacks at the time. And obviously, younger generation won't know who they were, but they were the fullbacks that were most known.
Yeah, absolutely. You went with Dixon. I went with Lauren just because of the Arsenal Invincible season, obviously. Cesar Azpilicueta is another player who didn't quite make this top 5 list. But again, I do think he's a decent shout out because I don't know how many seasons he spent at Chelsea. I feel like it's at least 10.
I think 2012, I think he joined.
Yeah.
He joined the year before they won the Champions League.
And he's only just recently, was it last season he left?
He left this year?
Oh, this year? Oh, of course, yeah. So that's more than 10 years, yeah. And I think he originally actually came to be like an Ashley Cole alternative replacement. So I think he actually came as a left back.
Yeah, I think he came as a left back, played centre back, and then ended up at right back. He just moved his way across the back 4.
Yeah, and and he was a right back, wing back, and then towards the end of his career, like sometimes filled in at centre back. I think he was Chelsea's captain for a long period of time. Obviously was their captain when they won the Champions League in 2021. So yeah, he's a decent shout as well. I think someone's got a little bit confused because they put Kieran Trippier, who should not be near this list.
I don't know. I mean, he's a good right back, but this is a top 5, not a top 20 or something.
No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look, if we want to do top 5 current players in the Prem,
he'd easily be in there.
Then sure.
All time, there's plenty of other options.
Yeah, there are some strong names on this list. And we shall start with number 5, shall we? Start with number 5. And speaking of big, the man with the biggest booty in Premier League history, potentially, Branislav Ivanovic. Gasky.
Spicy boy.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit surprised that he's come as far down as 5th.
Yeah, potentially. I wouldn't put him anywhere higher than 3rd.
No, well, where did you have him?
I had him at 5th.
Okay, tell me more.
Because it was difficult with the rest. Great player. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, I think he got a Champions League.
He did.
Yes, 2012, yeah. Chelsea won titles with him. He wasn't an exciting right back. No. But he was a brute. He was an Eastern European brute.
Well, I tell you what, he would be arguably perfect for City's current setup because he actually came in as a centre-back initially. Yeah. And that's why he's such an a non-traditional right-back, because he was a centre-back who was then moved to right-back. So you're quite right.
Even in that era, like with the last decade of the changing of how, how like play styles are coming out and things like that. And he doesn't fit that really, but he was a brilliant player. He did a bit of everything playing right back, and I thought he was a brilliant player.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. Yeah, his arse was massive, as I say, and that does matter because I remember reading an article by Yaya Toure, another man with a big bum in football, and that's a big part about a footballer's strength and being able to if you're jockeying the ball out of play, it's really good to use your glutes in that way. But yes, so him being a centre back at right back basically meant he was very good defensively. Wasn't a slouch offensively. He wasn't just it wasn't bad going forward.
It wasn't a pushover. No, he was
by any means.
He scored some goals.
Yeah, he scored some important goals as well.
Yeah, very important goals,
I think I remember, did he score one in the Europa League final, I think, for example?
If I remember rightly, he did. And yeah, he's just a big bloke.
A big bloke.
A very big bloke for a right back.
I remember, because it's such a unique profile for a right back, really. Whenever Chelsea would come to the Etihad in that sort of like the early to like mid tens season, what they would do is, without fail, so Clichy would be the left back normally, and like the goal kick, what Chelsea would do is they push everyone high up the pitch, and then they just stick Ivanovic on Clichy. So Ivanovic would go from right back all the way to right wing, and that was clearly, and then the goalkeeper would punt it up to Ivanovic, who would every single time out muscle and out jump Clichy, and then they'd win the ball possession from there. So it's a very good utility in that respect as well. To really unique skill sets.
And it works, doesn't it? Because not many teams use that, having that big. Because obviously now, even Newcastle have it now with Dan Burn, where it's just a big guy at fullback. And in certain situations, it does work perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even the game I'm thinking of, I think he actually scored that day against City as well.
There we go.
So, so when it wasn't the quickest, but when he got going, it was pretty tricky to stop him, to be fair.
Powerhouse.
Yeah, so I think Chelsea fans would probably have him higher, which is fair enough. I personally had him at 4th, but, I agree. He shouldn't go past 3rd.
I feel that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's some other bigger names who have done more.
Absolutely. And coming in at 4th, now this is sort of controversial because he did not appear on my list.
No, I'm not on mine either. This to me is recency bias. Me,
it might
personally
be a bit of recency bias and maybe a bit of, right back not being a sexy option, so there aren't too many other names.
Exactly.
Number 4 is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, we've spoken about Trent a lot on this podcast.
We've had a lot. Yes, we have. If you've listened to throughout the year, yes, there are a lot of... Trent's not a favourite over here at the NobCast.
No, not at right back anyway.
No.
In a defensive manner, if that makes sense.
Yes.
The reason why I can understand why he's on here, because in the 2020 season, especially, he was unbelievable. Even last season, he was just getting assist after assist. He was fantastic. But in the 22-23 season, the most recent season, and even before then, more so in the 22-23 season, it's pretty obvious that this guy is a massive liability defensively. And it's as simple as I refuse to put on a defender who cannot defend in a top 5 defenders list.
No. So I'd be fair and say because fullbacks do both roles, and that's common throughout the whole of the Premier League era. Top 10, I'd probably say yes.
Yeah, I'll have him 10.
I'd have him top 10, but I wouldn't have him in the top 5.
No chance.
Not at all. Like in the last 4 years? 4 years he's been like in the top of his game in terms of getting all these assists and records as a fullback. And I wouldn't say that's enough to push out a lot of other players who are good at both attacking and defending. So I just think it's crazy. It's recency bias at the end of the day. I mean, Premier League's been going for what we at now, 21 years, and someone in the last 4 is in there who was under scrutiny a lot of the time. So
yeah, just over 30 years. The Premier
30
League.
Years, sorry.
I think Trent's been a relevant player at Liverpool since around 2018. I think it was the 17-18 season where he had his first big break. So if we're to say that's 5 years, at least one, probably even 2 of those, he was borderline bad, poor. So I don't think there's been nearly enough time. I also don't think there's been nearly enough quality shown over that period of time. If you want to have a conversation about, the best individual season, then sure, we can talk about the 2020 season, whatever. But in terms of an all-time list and a best ever in history list, it's 1, too early. 2, it's not been consistent enough. And 3, there are those issues that we can't ignore in respect of defensive lapses and defensive liability.
Of the position, yeah.
Yeah. Now, hey, if this is a top 5 Premier League inverted right back list of, a right back going into midfield, then maybe that's a different conversation because his offensive prowess is not in question. Like you and I have never had a go with him for being bad going forwards.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's not just hating on Trent for the sake of it. Like, I always say he's one of the best crosses the ball in the league, and he's attacking wise, he's fantastic. But you're a fullback. That's brilliant, but you need to be trusted to do your defensive role as well, which he's not. Yeah. And it makes you think that season when they won the league and the Champions League, when he was amazing, how good were the centre backs in that situation? Because was Trent just actually capable, or was it just that the defenders were amazing and Fabinho was amazing covering him?
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting question. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I do think that, Liverpool's defence and midfield has suffered, and therefore Trent's game has suffered from a system perspective. But yeah, I agree with you. I do think there is some individual ownership that has to be taken there. It's too often he gets caught out. His spatial awareness isn't good enough from a defensive standpoint. So I in fact, if we just consult the list, I think a couple of people had Trent top of their list. That now, read into that whatever you will. The one person who did have Trent at the top is a Liverpool fan. So you can read into that whatever you will. But yeah, I don't think he should be in this top 5. If you want him in the top 5, I think 5th at the absolute highest for me.
Yeah, I can't see him going any higher than 5th.
No. Maybe at the end of his career, though. We can have that conversation.
You never know. Like, end of his career, longevity will come into it because he started at such a young age. That will, because in my opinion, one of the players that is going to come up in this list, longevity does put him high for me. So, yes, that's also a reason, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, totally agree. I totally agree. And now coming in at number 3 is Pablo Zabaleta, Manchester City's right back warrior, and a massive club legend and cult hero based on what he won, but also on how he just really appreciated and took on the whole culture of Manchester and basically became a Mancunian in himself and sees himself as a City fan and a Mancunian, which is great. Talk to me about Zabaleta, Gasky, because I think you had him in 3rd place, and here he is in 3rd.
I had him in 3rd. I would say he's probably one of the heavily underrated players in Premier League history, based on when you talk about players in every position, you don't mention Zabaleta, but people don't tend to. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about right backs, the name comes up, but otherwise you don't. But he was just a good all-round player. He wasn't going forward, wasn't gorgeous. Defending wasn't gorgeous, but he did everything. He was like them. So when you get them centre midfielders who are grafters, who are not exciting but grafters. He's that at right back. Yeah. And he won pretty much everything we say. He was, like I said, he was the key player in that right back position. And very important player, under the radar because he's not an exciting position.
Yeah, definitely. He wasn't a flashy player. He wasn't a goal scorer. For example, in that 11-12 season where we won the title, his first goal and only goal of the season was in that QPR game. So he wasn't renowned for being a goal scorer. Yeah. He wasn't renowned for putting in fantastic balls into the box. He was capable of going forwards in a fantastic fashion, but it was just his overall. It was just his overall game. He wasn't a liability defensively. He wasn't a liability offensively. He was just a really solid player, and he was consistent as well. I think consistency goes a long way, because I think he was at City for 9 years, maybe. And aside from his final season, which was Pep's first season, where he was clearly past it and couldn't be that player anymore, he was never bad. He never had a bad season. In fact, it was. Sorry, go on. You're going to say something.
I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. Never had a bad season. I don't think there was any point when you'd think that he's past it. Yeah, but he left, and I feel like he left at the right time. Definitely. Leave as that legend.
100%. And I just think of the season where United won the title in 12-13, and loads of players underperformed. Zabaleta was the only one who didn't drop his level, and he actually improved his level, and he became the out and out starting right back, and then he took Micah Richards out of the starting 11 for good. I think he got PFA Team of the Year that year, actually, you know, when City were not good enough to win the title. So, yeah, an absolute warrior for City. Fantastic player. Arguably could be second on this list. I think to be fair, I think second and third on this list are very close.
I think one's clear, but 2 and 3 is like you could have either way.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah, and that's what that's what we've done. To be fair,
pretty much. So I think you put him second, didn't you? And I put him third.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but you know, I don't mind either way because I think it is very close. But yeah, Pabzab, as I say, you know, a City legend. He's probably. I think we'll do a future video on City legends maybe. But for me, he's in that second tier of legends. You know, like the first tier is obviously, you know, Aguero, Vincent Kompany, David Silva, etc. But just below that, like an unsung hero type level. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like he's in the same tier alongside like Zabaleta, Yaya Toure, Joe Hart, that sort of level. So yeah, absolutely fantastic, and good to see him get his flowers because, as you say, I do think he has been a bit underrated, to be honest, and he's gone a bit under the radar. Definitely. Now, you mentioned longevity. Coming in at number 2 is, you know, Mr. Longevity question. Now, is he a longevity merchant? No, he's not. But we'll talk about that now. Gary Neville in second place. Huge legend for Manchester United. Won everything is to possibly win with them. Was at the club for, I don't even know how many seasons. 92 till... Like 2008, was it? 2009, something like that. But very long time. Yeah, like what is that? Like 15 years 16 plus. 16 years, something like that. And he was obviously there from a youth player as well. Yeah. And he was like their captain for a period. Now, I think a little bit of revisionist history has happened with Gary Neville, to be fair, to his detriment, because I think that a lot of people maybe only remember sort of like late Gary Neville, where he was a little bit mid-30s, where the game of football in the Premier League is evolving, and he's a 90s player. Yeah. And also he's old. Exactly. Yeah. And I think in his last season, I think he was injured for basically all of it. I think the last 2 seasons he barely played. Yeah. Like he wasn't in a lot. Yeah. So I think that people see that, they see the number of appearances, they see the quality of the team he had around him. Yeah. And I think they sort of try to pick on Gary Neville as sort of like the weak link in that team. And, you know, like, he's only in these conversations because he was there for so long, which is true to an extent. But I do think, as I said, I think there's a bit of revisionist history. And I think that he's being underrated and undersold as an actual footballer. What do you agree with that, Gasky? Yeah, no, definitely. Because like you said, you know, you talked about with Trent with the whole recency bias. It's kind of the opposite. People have seen the end of his career and judged that, like you said. But he played from 92, and the decade where United dominated, he was immense. He was a brilliant fullback. You know, that was the game. That was the game in the 90s. He wasn't, you know, flashy. I can run 90 mile an hour up the wing and swing it in the box. He always admit he was useless at shooting. He was useless. Not really useless at crossing, but, you know, he's useless at shooting. Yeah. I think there's probably a viral clip of him missing an easy chance like 2 yards out. Yeah. Because he's like, what he's, you know, he made the joke about the nosebleeds like going forward. But he was just pretty much similar to Zabaleta. He was just always there, doing his job. Rarely had bad games. If the team had a bad game, everyone does, but he would rarely have a bad game. He'd always be Mr. Consistent. And like, I would say he gets second for me over Zabaleta for longevity. He was there longer. You know, you have the arguments on who's better players in other positions, and you go off, he's done it more often. Whereas that's probably the reason I put Neville above him, is he's done it longer. If Zabaleta came to City earlier, he'd potentially go above him. But that's basically how I would put him in second. Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And yeah, I think that, you know, you mentioned his crossing, like he had a really nice link-up play with David Beckham in particular on that right-hand side. He was solid there. Rarely made mistakes. You know, obviously there's that iconic one that he did in like the last Manchester derby at Main Road, but that was few and far between compared to like the seasons upon seasons they did put him where he was a quality player. Even like, you know, their run to the treble in '99, he was incredibly good in that season as well. I don't know exactly how many times he was included in the team of the year, but it must have been, you know, 3, 4, 5 times at least, surely. So I think that we've mentioned before, younger fans might not, well, they'll only know him for being a pundit, won't they? Majority will, because he was a pundit from probably 2012 or something, 2013. Yeah, exactly. He's been playing it for a long time, so. Exactly. So yeah, they might see the number of appearances and just go, oh, it's just because he played loads, and that does come into it. But there was a really good player in there as well, obviously, and even for England, he played well for us. So shout out to him for that. But coming in at number one, Gasky, the NobCast community number one is also the same as our number one, and it's by a fair margin of the people we asked.
I think it was bar 2 people.
Yeah, I think only 2
bar
people
2 didn't put him
exactly.
First.
Everyone else put this man first, and the reason why we're doing this today is because Kyle Walker potentially leaving Manchester City, and in at number one is obviously Kyle Walker. So that's why I wanted to talk about him today, and right backs because of the links to Bayern Munich. But yeah, I think that we just talked about how good Neville and Zabaleta were, but in my opinion, this isn't really a debate, and it's by a fair margin. I think that Kyle Walker should hopefully be most people's number one all time.
Yeah. See, for me, you look at, like you said, with both of them, like Zabaleta and Neville weren't flashy. They weren't amazing footballers, but they were always 7 out of 10. You get a 7 out of 10 every game from them. But Kyle Walker, just liable to errors, but he's constantly 9 out of 10, constantly, for both defensively and offensively. And yeah, I feel like it's the difference between Walker, Neville, and Zabaleta is quality. He's a much better footballer. Does the same stuff as the other two, but he's just better. Yeah.
Definitely. He's also got that longevity going for him, because it's not just the time at City as well. I think people forget.
He was brilliant at Tottenham.
He was fantastic at Spurs. Yeah. In fact, he was a very different player at Spurs. He was much more offensive, and he was younger, obviously, and he was tasked with getting forwards and, using his explosive pace to get forwards and help his team attack. Whereas at City, he still does that on occasion, but at City, I think he's more associated with being more of a defensive.
But he's adapted to that now, hasn't he? And it's probably where the mistakes come from is, your game hasn't always been defensively. Yeah. So...
But I think that goes in his favour, the fact that, he spent I don't know how many seasons it was exactly, something like, 7 odd full seasons at Spurs, whereas being this more offensive right back comes into City. As soon as he signs for City, he'll become the Centurions and the domestic quadruple winners. Yeah. And he still sometimes goes forwards, but he is more tasked with being more conservative and adapting to his game and changing his role.
I would say the opposite. What you said then, it benefits him. I don't think it is. I think it makes him a better player, because I think it's harder to learn defensively than offensively.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
So him having to, but look, I'm not having to dig it in, but look at Trent, for example. He struggles. Yeah. Because it's harder to do. I think it's easy to teach offensively. So Wan-Bissaka, for example, I think it'll be easier for him to get better attacking than defending, because he's already brilliant at defending. But, to learn the defensive side, Walker's proved that if you can do it, you become the best fullback, which is what Trent potentially could be if you can somehow figure out how to defend.
Yeah, no, yeah, I absolutely right. I remember I think his first proper season was 2012. He won Young. I remember being annoyed because Aguero should have won Young Player of the Year that year, but Walker did win Young Player of the Year that year, so he obviously was still a very good player. He scored this ridiculous free kick. I remember he took it off Van der Vaart, and it was just fantastic. I can't remember who it was against, but it was brilliant. And he is definitely in that sort of second tier of City legend for sure.
Because I remember as well, I think it might have been 2018 World Cup or just before it or something like that. I remember not wanting to see him in an England shirt because he would just make mistakes. And he'd wind me up because he would just constantly just you'll give the ball away or just misjudge a pass. But now he's at the top because he's just been brilliant last 5 years. Yeah, and he was even able to play at centre back for England in that period as well. When needed as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, it does seem like we're approaching the end for Walker in terms of, teaching an old dog new tricks. He was this offensive outlet at Spurs, still that at City, but more focused on defending. And now Pep's asking for even more of him by going, but now you've got to play midfield. And he's like, well, I can't do that.
Stop, Brian. I'm over 30 now. Stop it.
Yeah, I can't.
That's probably why Stones is this Stones, you do it now. But you don't want to do it.
Yeah, so he might be approaching the end for Walker through no fault of his own, really. He's still a fantastic fullback and right back. It's just because, Pep's decided he doesn't like fullbacks anymore and now he wants them to be midfielders or centre backs. So, but yes, I think that if this is the last season for Walker, he surely leaves as the greatest right back in Premier League history. Not only from what he did at Spurs, but from what he's done and won at City, going forwards, defending. And also he's a leader as well. I think that's undersold. Like, he's one of our captains at City. Yeah. And you mentioned that he does sometimes make rash decisions. He is a very aggressive player, so that does come with the territory. But there aren't many players. Like, I remember when, like, it was, I remember, like, it was so long ago. It was just the World Cup against France. I know we lost that game, but so much build up beforehand was, Mbappe is going to be scary, whatever. I was not concerned about Mbappe for one moment.
Exactly, yeah, because when you've got that player. Exactly, he was always, because Mbappe was quiet that game. Really.
Yeah. Because of Kyle Walker.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even this season in the Champions League, Vinicius Jr., this terrifying player, and when it was 1v1 Walker Vinicius, it was Walker winning those duels every single time. So yeah, it's a shame that if this is the end, but he's surely leaves as like the best right back in Premier League history.
I would say so.
For sure. So we've got 2 City players in this top 5.
Fullbacks were boring early noise. Nothing exciting.
Where's Brown?
John O'Shea.
Well, speaking of centre backs, right back. But yes, anyway, guys, that was ours and indeed your top 5 Premier League right backs of all time. If you would like to get involved, then feel free to sign up to the Patreon. That is how you take part and contribute to these podcasts. And do also make sure to follow the NobCast so you all stay updated for whenever we release another podcast. Without further ado, what's the opposite without further ado? Because you say without further ado from the intro, don't you?
Without, I don't know how you close out.
With all of the ado, we want all of the ado.
I could do.
Yeah. I've been Nobbins.
I've been Gasky.
And we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.